Hello, and welcome to the Opportunity Desk live streaming on Facebook and Twitter, on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for joining us. My name is Meti Shwaye Yilma. I am a media and communication professional based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Today, we are having an amazing session, and I'm sure we'll be taking a lot of wisdom and knowledge from it. When you think of brands, what do you think of? Or when you think of the big brands, what are the words that come to you? And then when you think of yourself as a personal brand, what do you see? What are the words or the descriptions that would fit you? Or if you want to position yourself in a specific way, how would it be? So today, if you have questions such as this ones, you are lucky because we are bringing you an amazing guest and he will be presenting a lot about it. And today's session is positioning your personal brand for career opportunities. And we're having none other than Gbenga Awomodu, and he is a certified marketing professional with about a decade of experience across industries, including online media, oil and gas, healthcare, power, transportation, and telecommunications. Gbenga currently serves as the managing partner at Tweak-Centric Solutions, a marketing, communications, and content solutions consultancy based in Lagos, Nigeria. And prior to this role, he served as a marketing specialist and acting marketing manager for the mobile division at Samsung Electronics West Africa, with primary focus on Nigeria. In this role, he is responsible for driving marketing communication strategies and executions for all mobile devices sold in the country. When it comes to his education, Gbenga holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Lagos, a diploma in professional marketing from the Chartered Institute of Marketing in the United Kingdom, and a certificate in advanced brand management for the Brand Marketing Academy, Lagos, Nigeria. And if you are staying until the end, he brought to you some kind of surprise. I am not going to spill it now. He will tell you all about it later. And I hope we'll be taking a lot of lessons from this. Gbenga, thank you very much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you so much, Meti. Nice to meet you again.
Oh, same here. So now we can start tweeting and posting on Facebook, and make sure that you tag Opportunity Desk. And when you ask questions, you can use the hashtag OD Live. We'll get all your questions on Facebook and Twitter. And Gbenga, now the screen is all yours.
Thank you so much, Meti. So thank you, everyone, for joining this session today. It's a pleasure to be here again. I love telling stories. I love storytelling a great deal. And today, we would be exploring what it means to manage your brand, position your brand for different opportunities that present themselves. Over the last 8 to 10 years of my work experience, I've, of course, been through different situations and circumstances. I've been exposed to different groups and particular work situations as well. I have been a 9-to-5er. I've also been an entrepreneur, and I've met people who have also been in these two different buckets, whether jointly or separately. And something that resonates over and over is how people are perceived, how you are perceived, and the impact of that on your career growth. On tweakmycontent.com, which is the primary platform for my company, we recently posted about boredom and how young people, millennials, are likely to get stressed in their jobs. And over time, what they realized was that generally, unlike maybe the baby boomers, people who were born much earlier, people used to have traditional career pathways where they would graduate from school, then take on a full-time job, and then stay in a company for as much as 5, 10, 20 years. Some even stayed in one company throughout the entire lifespan. A lot of that is changing right now. And then we have people, I mean, millennials right now, a lot of people hardly spend more than 2 years in a particular job. And even those who run businesses sometimes have to change a lot of times. A lot of businesses even fold up within the first 5 years, for example. So how do we ensure that, regardless of the path that we've chosen as individuals, whether as entrepreneurs or career people, we are able to achieve success? I want to speak from the art as much as possible today. You may not really have slides, but I'm going to go through a lot of details. I want to take a bit of time for the next 30 minutes, thereabouts. I will share some insights based on my work experience and reading as well, research. So one quick snapshot is around traditional career paths. So traditionally, you have a series of stages. There's a particular material, Fundamentals of Human Resource Management, where they talked about 5 different traditional career stages. Exploration, which is essentially when you're 0 to 25 years old. And then beyond exploration, that's a general range, because usually some people would go beyond that. They will graduate from that exploratory phase of their career faster than others. Some people start working by the time they're 18, 21. So it can vary, but it's just a general guideline. But then beyond that, you then have the establishment phase, which is where many people who are on this call are likely to be on. 26, we can say 25 to 35, really, because it's like you have borderlines. And this is where, beyond education, where you will have chosen whether you want to go to vocational school or take a college degree or go to a professional school to learn professional courses and skills. You then begin to go to the establishment phase, where you focus a lot on job search, job acceptance. When you get a job, you do your induction, you're orientated, and then you begin to get your first job assignments, and then you go into the learning period where you learn a whole lot within this phase. At this point, a lot of people, of course, go out of the jobs, come back again, change career paths in between. A lot of things happen within this period, 25 to 35. In certain countries or in some climes, you find out that some people might just be graduating from the university, for example, at 30 and 30, 31, 32. So this kind of captures everyone. From there, you go into the mid-career section, that period where you have like people from 35 to 50, where you are leveling off, you are trying to, maximize your productivity there. You're trying to determine whether you want to continue as someone who is doing a 9 to 5 or someone who wants to run the business, or you want to find a way to balance both so that you can maximize your potentials, like they say. So mid-career is a very, very important point, because at that point you then determine whether you want to take new courses, you want to start going into senior management or not. Of course, there are limited positions at the top. The more you go, a lot of companies tend to be bottom heavy. So a lot of people it's like a pyramid, right? You go up, the higher you go, the fewer people you have there. And you also realize that at that point, when you get into your mid-career, it's not so easy for you to just jump into companies. At that point, you see people spending more like 5 years on the average on a role, or depending on your industry, or maybe 3 years, 4 years. You tend to take a bit more time there. And then at some point, you might have different situations that could happen and that can force the companies to make different decisions, even you as well. If you continue to work on your career progress and some of the things I'm going to talk about today, then you can then either follow a graph upwards, or in some cases, unfortunately, people also begin to decline at that point. But then you also have late career, which is usually between 50 and 70 years old. For 50-year-olds to 70-year-olds. Somewhere in between, people begin to, depending on where you're living or where you are in this part in the world. Some people in some countries right now, people are beginning to stay in the workforce longer, maybe because of higher life expectancy, and things like that, and then economic situation. So people, and then some countries need more people in the workforce to continue to grow the economy. And then the decline generally sets in around when, of course, in late career, the job assignments you get are mainly based on your maturity of judgment, because now you're now like a manager of managers, or the head of a division in the company, the head of a department, or an entire business. And then the decline sets in later on. So essentially, like I mentioned, it seems like a graph, like a progression starts. You explore yourself from the exploratory stage, and then move into establishment when you're between 25 and 30, and then you begin to move into the mid-career from 35 into 50, and then from 50 into 70, you have your late career generally. And of course, some people get into some careers, move really fast, and then change and then move into another career path. Sometimes that happens. So those are things to note in that regard. But then something that can set you apart is your personal brand, which brings me to our topic for today, right? Today we're talking about how you can position your personal brand for global career opportunities. And career opportunities vary, so you can have promotion in your current job as an opportunity, or getting a new role, or getting a role in a particular field that you prefer, or a particular industry that you want to then explore further. And of course, depending on your industry, there are different things to consider as well. What's a brand, really? So for me, I'm a marketer. I'm a proud member of this Chartered Institute of Marketing UK, and I love to always take a look at what CIM is saying about different marketing related terms. So a basic definition from CIM says that a brand is a set, so a set of physical attributes of a product or service, but not just physical attributes, right? But it's talking about the beliefs. It says together with the beliefs and the expectations surrounding it. So it's a unique combination of that name, product, logo, whatever, it's a unique combination which the name or that logo of the product or service should evoke in the mind of the audience. So that's something to note there. So we're saying that you have different elements of the brand. But ultimately, when you talk about the brand, you're talking about expectation. You're talking about a promise that you will get a particular experience by engaging on it or interacting with that brand. And then in terms of your brand identity, it's definitely made up of a number of items. But most importantly, you want to answer questions like, what are your values? So what values do you hold dear to you? How do you communicate your products? In this case, as a person, you are a product. As a person who is a career person or an entrepreneur, you are a product. And then you want to try to define what brand you are as a person. So a number of other things to note as well. So your brand identity is the personality of your business or a promise to your customers. In this case, it's the personality is your personality, and that promise you hold for your customers. In this case, stakeholders in your organization where you work. It could be your manager, your boss's boss, and all that. So those are a number of things to really consider. So in terms of brands now and identity, I want to now go further into what a personal brand is. I will just read out one definition that I kind of liked while taking a look at some of what other people are saying as well. Skelly in the book Rockable Personal Branding says that your personal brand represents the way you want other people to think about you, right? The way you want other people to think about you. Then personal branding hinges on perception and the stories you tell about yourself. So there's that element of you having to say something about yourself, or you want to show it. I mean, in storytelling, they talk about show, don't tell. I mean, you can have a good blend of the two as well. And then the things you emphasize and the things you don't. And then that will bring me to talking about brand archetypes. But before I go into all that, remember we talked about personality, your brand personality, uh, your brand identity being more of a personality, right? When people hear you, what do they? I mean, when people meet you or they hear about you from other people, what are they saying? And is it in correlation with what you really want to be, how you want to be perceived or seen as? So there are some 12, let me say a whole lot, right? But I won't go, I will try to just point out some of them in bits and then try to share. I mean, it's just more of getting us to think about these things, in greater details. So if you check it out, the 12 brand archetypes essentially is more like the standard personas that have been identified based on research over the years. Of course, these things have evolved as people continue to do research and observation and follow trends. But essentially, they're 12, but we can break them into like 4 parts. So there are 3 of them that are focused more on providing structure. So that personality is more of a personality that is focused on providing structure. So you have the creator, the ruler, and the caregiver. So your brand can be that of a creator, where you're talking about innovation, or you can be more of a ruler, which is more of a brand that seeks, to show control, to have control over maybe circumstances, or you want to take charge. And then, it's more about the focus is on structure. And then the caregiver is more of that brand that is focused on service, serving people. You see that, of course, sometimes you may have different elements of these personas in your brand, but ultimately there is one that is most visible. There's one that is most how I put it, relatable when it comes to your person, your person and your attributes. So the caregiver wants to give service, the ruler wants to control, creator, is an innovator really. And then on the right side to that, quadrant, you have those that yearn for paradise, like they want something, really, they want, we can almost say perfection. They're careful and all that, but we have a bit of an 2 sides there, 2 extremes in a way. So we have the innocent, there's that persona archetype, innocent, right? Which that brand is usually focused more on safety, and some of us, even, in our personal dealings, people know you as someone who is particular about safety. You are careful about things, and it shows in how you share, what you share, how you talk, how you address people. And then you have the sage, who is who is focused more on understanding things. You can see, a depth of understanding, in how this person operates. I'm taking a bit of time here because I want to ensure that we pick some of these things and you can think through it, which one is more, which one is closest to you. And then the explorer focuses on freedom. They want to explore, but they still yearn for paradise anyways. That's something unique about those 3 guys. The innocent, sage, and then the explorer. And then on the bottom quadrant, I have those who want to connect with others. So here you have, the everyman, the jester, some people say the joker, and then the lover. And then the everyman wants to have a sense of belonging. So it's still about connecting with others. And then you have, the jester who really just wants to have enjoyment. That's like the typical what you think when you think about that brand. And of course, a lot of comedians fall under this category. They fall under this archetype. And then you have, the lover who is focused a lot on intimacy. And you see them maybe expressed in people who, for example, who love to create experiences for couples. That could be a brand that fits. So as a personal brand, if you are more about that, then you probably might see how you fit in, and then the kinds of things you want to do, to show that. Then the last quadrant is the one that has the outlaw, or they call them rebels sometimes, the magician, and then the hero. The hero is focused on mastery. The hero is a master, like, here to save the world, kind of. And then magician is about the power. The magician wants to hold the power to things. For example, you think about, say, Disney, I think, is a magician in terms of the brand archetype. And then the outlaw is someone who just wants liberation. I mean, I won't conform. Apple, for example, is an example of okay. That's so Apple is a creator, so you can see that there's a lot of innovation. I want to go into the examples now. The Sage, I mean, the Innocent, for example, Dove as a brand, can be seen as the innocent, archetype, brand archetype. Of course, Nike is the hero. You see a lot of mastery in there. And then, I don't know if you know about Virgin Atlantic, for example. The Virgin brand is the rebel. That's something to note as well. And then just trying to give you some examples. The Jester, I think Skittles falls under that brand. Then you have Rolex as the ruler. I mean, and you see that come to play a lot. I think I want to pause there. If we can share questions on the feed, and then I will get to them soon. So essentially, I've tried to spend a bit of time to run through the different 12 brand archetypes: the creator, the ruler, the caregiver, the everyman, the jester, the lover, the hero, the magician, the outlaw, the explorer, the sage, the innocent. So when we talk about once we've been able to establish those brand archetypes, it begins to make sense when you start going into the details in terms of how you want to define yourself and how you want to make these things play out, and how you want to emphasize some things and de-emphasize other things. So one step that I usually recommend in terms of you beginning to define your brand is you may want to actually check out your, do a situational analysis. For people who may have listened to me in recent times on some sessions I've held, and they must have heard about, the SWOT analysis a lot from me. That's a very powerful tool because it's supposed to help you identify your strengths, which is the S, right? What do you have that others don't really have? What do you do, seemingly, in a very smooth way, you have less difficulty doing? What assets do you have? Do you have intellectual property, for example? Is there something you do uniquely that no one else on your team, for example, placing you in an office setting, or in an office setting, you have a team, and what do you do differently compared to the others? Like what they always call you for to do. I mean, those are things you want to think about. What really distinguishes you? Then weaknesses, very important. So what do you lack? So strengths and weaknesses are usually like internal factors you want to really take a look at. Sometimes you need help by going out to other people to help you find out. You can do a 360-degree assessment of yourself by asking people above you, beneath you, around you, your contemporaries at the office, for example. If you're a business person, you can ask. Sometimes you may need to ask, fellow entrepreneurs, and just get a sense of how they perceive you and all that. And then opportunities are more around what the market needs. In this case, what your key stakeholders need, really. Who are you serving? Who's your customer in this particular context if you're a career person? In this case, it could also be people to whom you are applying for a job or a scholarship opportunity, for example. What do they really want? What are the new technologies out there? Those are opportunities you want to look at. Of course, Opportunity Desk is a fantastic example of a huge portfolio, like a huge bank of information for where you can even pick a lot of opportunities. I mean, which is why it's so named, right? And then who else can you reach based on your strengths and things? I mean, the trends around, which is why you need to always check the trends. And of course, even in the workplace, you cannot, by looking at things that are not really working well. Sometimes things that are not working well could be opportunities for you to step into and make a difference and build your personal brand. And then threats. What are the things that are like obstacles to your growth? For example, is it getting to work late, or not having certain skills, hard skills and soft skills? Sometimes weaknesses can expose you. A lot of times, when you have weaknesses, they can expose you to threats. Threats are usually like external factors. You have You're looking at your competitors. I mean, I don't know who your competitors could be in that particular context. What are the micro trends? The macro trends. What are things happening in your industry at the moment? How do you work on them? How do you ensure that you ride the wave? COVID-19 is a case in point. Right now, a lot of industries have been turned around. Some are really suffering a lot because of the impact of COVID-19. But in that chaos, so to say, in certain spaces, is or are hidden opportunities that you can bring out, or there are ways you can adjust to ensure that these threats, you mitigate the impact of the threats on your career. Uh, in the office, it can be maybe how you address people, or maybe how soon you turn in your assignments and things like that, or how you engage. I mean, you want to look at how those things expose you to threats, because threats could be changes in business environment, which then means that the company may then start looking out for people who they don't really need again, and you can easily be passed on for opportunities like promotions in the workplace. So you want to make sure that those things are likely to expose you to external threats, trends, things that you don't really have much control over. You can mitigate it. So now we've talked about what a brand is. We've talked about your personal brand. Talked about attributes. I've tried to run through the different brand archetypes, and then I want to talk a bit about key success factors, because why do you want to build a brand in the first place? Usually because ideally your brand should be focused on your consumer, in this case, your key stakeholders, as a career person. So why do you want to build your brand? Because you want to be successful. And you want to be successful by ensuring that you add value, you bring value to your target audience or your consumer. In this case, it'll be your key stakeholders, your boss, your company, the brand you work for. You want to see growth and all those things, but you need to first ensure that you think about your consumers, because if you're going to be successful as a brand, you need to consider your consumers, who are your target audience. So a very simple tool as well that people use. I mean, of course, this is something that I really came to know when I was at General Electric, because there was a lot of emphasis on that, is the PI model. So PI is an acronym for performance, image, and exposure. There was a lot of focus on that when I was at GE, and I mean, you can understand that most multinationals are particular about helping you to grow beyond just the technical skills, but the soft skills as well. Because ultimately, when you become a manager, as you grow into your mid career and then late career phases, you begin to get to take on jobs that require you being able to be mature in your dealings. You're able to manage your emotions, you're able to manage human beings, and you start going to things like psychology, organizational culture. Most organizations, if you're a performer, let me even just tell you, I mean, generally, it's been researched, and then Ave Coleman, for example, talks about it in his book, that your success generally 10% impact is what you are is what you can have max generally based on your performance in terms of your career growth and success. And then image accounts for like 30%. Imagine that, right? So performance is 10%. Yes, you need to do your work quite all right, but so how are you perceived by others can go a long way in determining whether you get promoted or not to the next stage, because you can as well keep getting increased salary. Your company can continue to increase your salary, give you bonus every year if you're performing so well. But so I mean, it's not in every place that your performance is just about your art skills only. You have your art skills, you have your soft skills. You can program quite all right, but can you manage others? For example, can you communicate? Can you write? Can you communicate yourself in writing and things like that? How can you engage with senior management? Do you have executive presence, like they say? So those are things to note. So performance, generally, what you do daily tends to account for just about 10%, in terms of how your success is determined in a career, in a career journey. And then image, the impression of others, what the impression is about you. Do most people agree about the type of person that you are? If you're saying you are a rebel, for example, does everybody agree with that? If you say you're focused on being a caregiver, does everybody agree with that? Do you deliver on time and things like that? Those are some things that you want to ask yourself, because those things make about 30% of the impact on your career success. And then exposure, surprisingly, is 60%. So imagine. So now it's not to say that you shouldn't do a good job. If you try to have a very fantastic image and you try to get exposure and all that, it's not about making a lot of noise and being a nuisance, right? But it's more about performing quite all right, but then trying to ensure that the manner in which you do carry out your performance, is such that it leaves other people with a good impression of the person that you are, and they see you potentially as a leader. Because most times, when they promote based on potential, not necessarily performance. So you have to look at that. Performance can give you pay raise. Some people can you realize that in some organizations, someone might be in the same role for like, say, 5 to 10 years, and they're probably maybe called specialists, and they just stuck there or just left there, because it depends. You also want to determine whether you want to be a manager really, or you want to just stay at a particular point and just relax. I'll be wrapping up in about 15 minutes so that we can begin to I can begin to address questions from us. So there's the option of saying you want to just be a specialist, and that's fine. That can be a choice that you make as well. But when you start going into being a manager of managers and going into like director roles and all that, then you have to start paying attention to things like your image. So do you do things when you plan to do them and things like that? Everyone, has to face that one way or the other. And then exposure is more about, do people know who you are, and the results you deliver for your team or your organization? You have to build genuine relationships with people, offline and online. Not when you need them, you then start building relationships with them. You build relationships over the years, and then you build your credibility over the years as well, put in a lot of the work. But exposure is mainly about you getting the right people, the right stakeholders, to know about your image, which is supposed to be positive, and then your performance, that you can deliver, and you can deliver in a manner that is in alignment with the company's values and things like that. So those are key things to note. I've talked about self-evaluation. I've talked about how you need to do your SWOT analysis and to ensure that you can take advantage of opportunities. Because when you do a SWOT analysis, your strengths, your weaknesses, you get your internal feedback, and then opportunities and threats, you look at, scan the environment and see what's happening. What are the opportunities that you can take advantage of by working on your strengths? Sometimes you might have to just find a way to take on roles that will use more of your strengths and less of your weaknesses, or that will require more of your strengths and less of your weaknesses, so that you don't get trapped, or you don't keep getting a negative image out there. I mean, you don't have your image being seen as a negative one and not a positive one. So that's something to note as well. In terms of communicating, because now we've talked about situational analysis, where you do your SWOT analysis and all that, you think through the pie, look at your state of things. How will you score yourself in terms of performance, in terms of the image you're building? Are you conscious about it? And then the exposure. Exposure can be achieved, of course, in several ways. I mean, a lot of that comes in when you're talking about the tactics or the strategies as well. Now, you have to define, once you've done this evaluation, you have to now define, okay, who do I want to be? You have to focus, have a single focus as much as possible. You can't be everything to everyone. So you have to determine what you really want to be. Why are you here, in this life? What do you want to be remembered for? When you try to plan your life, look down the line, you should have like a 20-year plan, and then break it down back to like a 10-year plan, and then 5-year plan, and then that feeds into what you should be doing at the moment. Because when we now start talking about you applying for jobs, applying for scholarships, applying for programs to get onto some programs, some special programs. All these things come into play. They want to know who you are. They want to know what you have to offer. They want to know what your reasoning is like. They want to know how much you're thinking into the future, and then what you're doing now to get into that future that you're looking at. And they want to see that there's an alignment in both the actual skills required, and then the manner, the soft skills that are also required to help you get to that final point. Of course, there needs to always be that alignment in terms of the value that you bring to the table, and then can your brands can both brands work together. So let's talk about that in a bit. So I've talked about you trying to have a sense of your career timeline, what you want to do, defining the timelines, where you want to be per time, when you want to enter into your mid-career and then the late career, how fast you want to grow. For some people may actually move fast enough, and by the time they are 30, 32, they're already like directors. Some people, for some reasons, might have to wait into like 40s to become like directors, or in their 50s. But ultimately, you have to own your own journey. You have to own your decision. You have to take a decision now, determine where you want to be, how fast you want to go. Because we're talking about all these things in relation to your life goals as well, other aspects, not just career, like family. For some people, they might want to focus a bit more on building a family, training their children, for example. So they may want to reduce their pace in terms of how fast they move, in terms of titles, job titles, and things like that. That's fine. These are choices we have to all make at some point, at one point or the other. I think that's about that on that. So you have to determine, who you are, why you are here in the first place, what you want to achieve. Take a look at those archetypes again and be sure. I mean, that is for planning purpose. There are some further details, of course, as you do your research and do some more work here. And then all these things essentially should then reflect in how you approach your work and then what you do eventually. I want to try to, if there are questions, I should be able to take them in about, say, 7 minutes, in about 7 minutes. So in terms of your CV, okay, so your CV is one of those marketing tools, right, that you can, use to send a signal of your performance, and then maybe image as well, because you can then capture things, impressions from people in your CV. And then, of course, now the exposure can then be more of who then gets to see your CV in the first place. I'm just giving like one micro example of how you can view your tools like your CV and cover letter. Of course, organizations have different like gatekeepers. In some cases, as you grow in your career, you begin to have more, depending on how you position yourself on different platforms. Which brings me to your promotion, which is how you get your exposure externally. Internally, you have to maybe be part of, you may want to consider being part of internal groups. When you're given any assignment, you try to put in your best. Think a bit ahead of what's happening. Think like 2, 3, 4 steps ahead, and then have suggestions on ground, so that you're not just delivering 100%. If you can deliver 120%, 150%, you also do that. You ensure that you have that capacity to show your potential. So once you have all that in place, you have to place yourself well. So in terms of exposure, of course, internally, you can consider internal groups in your organization. You can as well, I mean, that's offline now. Offline, you can also, be part of professional bodies. That can be one way to get some further, boosts in terms of people who get to see the value of what you can do. Of course, those groups also, or really certification, certification institutions, for example, give you a sense of credibility. They add to your credibility. That's your image. And then you may still get some further exposure down the line in that space, because depending on how you interact, you can get the right people to notice your performance and, get a sense of the image you have. And then you then get career opportunities. For online, for example, I'll just give a few examples. So LinkedIn is a major one. I have worked with a lot of clients over the years. I've worked on hundreds of CVs over the last, 5 to 10 years, right? And the truth is, I still have a lot of clients who have like almost zero presence on LinkedIn, whereas that's where a lot of recruiters actually go to check for people, and they sieve through. And when you go higher in your career, you begin to see a lot more focus on that aspect. Whereas, so I need to wrap up in about 5 minutes now, so that we can take questions. Whereas early career, your CV essentially, you want to ensure that you capture the most important things in there. A few tips, on CVs, for example, formats. Try not to have. I mean, I don't think JPEG should be like a format for CVs, except if they ask for it. Some peculiar situations may demand that. But ideally, your CV should just be a simple Word or PDF document, properly formatted. You don't need to have all the fancy colors and all those. I guess you have an idea what I'm talking about. There are lots of fancy CVs I see these days. If you're not a graphic artist, for example, a designer who's trying to show a portfolio, then you might just want to keep it simple. Have your have this section where you talk about you give your name, of course, and then summarize put a caption to, if you have a lot of years of experience, you put your, say, experienced, maybe in brackets, 5+ years, marketing professional. Then you have your contact details under there. These days, people are encouraged not to necessarily put their particular home address. Most companies will provide room for you to plug that into the submission portal if they have a place where they receive these emails, receive your application. And then, of course, career summaries are not necessary for most people in their early career, most times, because you've not necessarily done much. Most times, what people tend to do under the career summary portion below their address bar is just talk about who they are, what they've achieved. But when you're applying for a job, the company wants to know what you bring to the table, in the first place. So note that. For core competencies and skills can be at the top. Usually, if you have like 0 to 5 years experience, or you don't have a lot of years of experience, and usually one reason why people have that section is to highlight the keywords, because when you see a job announcement and you see the job description, especially if you're going to apply on a website, most times they use the applicant tracking system, ATS. So you want to be able to beat that most times. So to beat that, most times you need to have the keywords. So if they've announced a job, they've put out the job description, you should have all the keywords, all the requirements. So you have to think through that as well. So what does the consumer need in this case? And then you plug all those keywords in there. Of course, you have a mix of hard skills and soft skills. Hard skills, like, I don't know, some people put MS Office in early career. Of course, it's at a point it's a given, but sometimes you may need to actually put some of those keywords. Digital marketing, then soft skills, people put maybe team leadership and things like that. So those are some things you might want to put on there. Then, of course, work experience. I will just talk briefly about STAR. In about 2 minutes, I will start taking questions. In about 2 minutes, I'll start taking questions. The STAR model, right? I know the last session that we had with Courtney, she talked a bit about the STAR model: situation, task, action, results. So essentially, there are 2 ways to go about your work experience. Of course, you want to start with the most recent work experience and you begin to cascade it down to the least recent. And you want to focus more on the most important accomplishments you've had in each role. One way to go about it is think about your key responsibilities and then key accomplishments. For early career people as well, most times you don't necessarily need to separate key accomplishments and then key responsibilities for the roles, right? Key accomplishments can just be like key responsibilities can just be to summarize quickly what the job entails from like a generic scope. But key accomplishments should then be focusing more on numbers as much as possible. You need to try to quantify your accomplishments. And then how you get there most times is think about the most important results you've achieved in the job, maybe 3 or 5 of them. And then think about, the particular action you took as maybe part of a team or as a leader for that team. And then think about the specific tasks required. In some cases, in most recent cases, people tend to separate them. So, I mean, you can practically take out tasks. So you just have SAR, really, situation, because you're working back your result, the action you took, and then your situation. You can add them in different columns, and then for each line, you now summarize at the front as a star, and then you have like 3 to 5 stars for each job. So you summarize the situation, the action you took specifically, and then the results, and then you fuse them together into a strong bullet point. You can have that, and then that's how you can build your work experience part. Usually you do most of the work there, and then you can always have like a primary CV that has all those details, like it's very full. But ultimately you should typically not have more than 1,000 words in your CV, meaning about 2 to 3 pages. A friend of mine recently recommended that typically for every 5 years of experience you have, just a page is fine. So you have to think through it and summarize, because you don't want to put too much details. A lot of a lot of recruiters just spend about 5 seconds scanning through your CV. If you make it through the ATS, you then just 5 6 seconds, just look at the keywords. Okay, which is why you talk about your key core responsibilities at the top. If you have a lot of years of experience, you can have a career summary, but you still make it consumer focused. You focus it on the needs. You'll have studied the job description. I think I can start taking questions now, because beyond that, once you've sorted out your work experience part, most times you don't need to put your education and then maybe trainings and courses or certifications you've done. Note the most recent ones. Indicate the title of the training, indicate the organizer, and then put the year, or the particular month and year, depending on what format you're taking for that job. And then, of course, for that training. So you put that there. And then professional memberships are very useful if you have them already. If you're in marketing, for example, CIM, and there's CIPR for people in PR, Chartered Institute of Public Relations UK. And there are other bodies as well. There's PMI, for example, for project management people. And there are so many of them. So you want to take note of those. And yeah, you should be able to highlight them if you've done those certifications. As much as possible, try to tailor your job for the particular role you're applying for. Look at the keywords and ensure that you have them highlighted. What are the most important things? Of course, you also need to tell yourself truthfully, do I really fit into this? Am I like 60-70% ready? Okay, so am I 60? Because most times when you're getting into a job, the truth is that you don't necessarily need to be 100% ready for the role. Like, if that's the case, then you probably may get bored very soon. But if you're getting into a new role or you're getting promoted, you should be, if you have like 60%, match in terms of competency, that may not be so bad, because when you get on the role, it gives you a room to grow. It takes some more years before you then adjust and stabilize, and you probably start getting bored, possibly, depending on the kind of role that is. But oftentimes when you do the same thing over and over, it can be boring. So you have to be creative. You have to keep exploring your potentials as well. Quickly back to the CV. So I talked about trainings and courses, professional memberships. Community service and development is very important. A lot of people don't put that. Don't underestimate it. Don't underestimate the power of things that you do in the community. Sometimes you can be in a religious organization. Maybe you're a Christian or a Muslim, or you're in a particular religious group. Those things you do for the community, whatever, because that's what the keyword is: community. It can be a professional community or like a social community. Like in school, you could be part of the JCI or ISEC and things like that. You need to be able to capture those experiences, quantify them as much as possible in figures, percentage increase you experienced, or the organization experience based on the particular action you took. Always think STAR or SAR, like the situation, the particular action you took, and then the results. Then you always summarize them. So those will give you the bullet points. And then, of course, personal interest, you can always fix a few things there. But you can also be strategic about that as well. But ultimately, you want to be authentic, be truthful about it. A CV is not a tool for you to lie. Within, you should be projecting the best representation of what you've got to offer the consumer. I think Meti can join in and help with some of the questions that have been asked.
Thank you so much. That was incredible, Gbenga, and we took so many nuggets from it. Yes, just to summarize, in like, I don't know, 20 seconds. The first thing is self-awareness is very critical into building our personal brand. So we should know
Yeah.
what our values and principles are, and we
Yeah.
have to take a SWOT analysis, just like we do for companies. We have to take
Yes.
personal strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and traits analysis, and then
Yes.
uh, try to describe yourself in few words, in few adjectives. Just look at the
Yes.
big brands and see what they are. Some of them represent love, some of them represent adventure. So where do you find yourself? That's one of the things that we should do. And then uh, define who we are or who we want to be and what we want to do. And after that, you give us
Yeah.
few tips about building a CV or writing a CV. We should be very simple. We should not complicate it. We should not create
Yeah.
those fancy CVs, and make sure that you put your experiences into, or who you are, what you do into STAR. That's
Yeah.
situation, action, and results.
Results.
Put it in different ways, but make sure that your CV contains all this. But more than anything, you have to know who you are, and you have to know what you want to do and who you want to do it for. So these are
Yes.
the nuggets that I took from your presentation. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Meti.
Yes. So let's take few questions. And since I'm here, I want to take an opportunity. But then, okay, great. So Nelly, let me give an opportunity to one of our viewers. Should begin my personal branding while in university? If so, why and how realistic is that? That's the question from Nelly.
Awesome. Wow, Nelly Mafia, thank you so much for that question. Fantastic one. I'm so glad to have that question, so I can address it. So, personal branding really starts from as soon as you are aware of, as soon as it can be as early as even secondary school, primary school. Really, everyone needs to be aware, self-aware, and then begin to build uh, that story, begin to build out who you are as a person, or begin to reflect on what you're doing. Is this how I want to be? Which is why we read a lot of books, and we're inspired by books like say Think Big, for example, or Gifted Hands, because we start to get a picture of where we want to be, or who we could be, who we might want to be like. So undergraduates should start right away. Recently, we to Eccentric Solutions collaborated with the American corner, hosted a co-creation hub in Lagos. And I know we run career advantage sessions where we actually focus a lot on this. We prioritized undergraduates, female undergraduates, actually. Quite a lot of them were part of that program. And I realized, so on one side, some people really were not doing so well with that. They weren't aware. But by taking part in those sessions, they became aware of the importance. For example, just to quickly wrap up, there was a lady who, I think she's even just finishing school, or she's just starting NYSC. That's a mandatory 1-year service in Nigeria. And her CV was already 2 pages. And she was a member of ISEC in school. That's the student body, international student body, that gets to provide volunteer opportunities. So as an undergraduate, she had volunteered to go and work in Cameroon. So her CV already looks set for a role in development. So I would readily hire her. So by just working with us through the career advantage sessions and then the CV review process, I was able to help her highlight the key things. And of course, by starting to build it, well, because all those things she was doing as an undergraduate were contributing to her brand. So in a way, I could then see her as a potential development, expert. And then she was focused on education. So it's not too early. While I was in university, even as an engineering student, I applied for the summer program at Goldman Sachs. Only 2 of us in my class got to the telephone interview stage. I had to work on my CV. I spent some days researching, and I was able to highlight some of the key things. I had worked with an NGO after I left secondary school. I was able to capture those experiences, and then those things gave me the leverage, and I got to that stage in the interview process because I had been able to build a certain brand that was attractive to a potential employer for an internship.
Okay, great. Actually, while you're at it, so what happens, or you are a good example for this. Early on, you studied chemical engineering, and then
Yes.
you changed into marketing. So
Yes.
when you change your career, because most young people go to school and they don't know what they want, and they learn something, they figure out they are good at something else. So how did you go through that transition? How did you handle it? And how did you change your brand from a chemical engineer to a marketer? So give us some tips on that.
Great. Thank you so much. So I identified, so for me, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it's a journey, right? So in life, you go through phases. Sometimes you are on a path. I mean, I was very good in with mathematics. I had a distinction in mathematics, further mathematics, economics, chemistry, A1, A1, A1. So I was just generally in that line, chemical engineering. And I had a mentor, like someone I looked up to, who was an alumnus of my secondary school, CMS Grammar School in Lagos. So that made me move in that regard to a large extent. That was a major influence. But while I was in school, the gap year I kind of had, because I didn't get to resume university immediately. The school had an issue, and then they couldn't start the session. We had to wait. So I interned with an NGO where Action Health Incorporated in Lagos, where I was able to work in different units, and I started reading books, and I started discovering more about life, and then I just gradually started transitioning. So while I still went ahead to study chemical engineering in school, I was paying attention to writing. I still took on some assignments for the NGO, even when there were, when there was, say, ASU strike, for example. There was, sometimes the lecturers could decide to have carry out industrial actions. I was able to keep taking on responsibilities gradually. Some unpaid, some paid. I worked on a magazine in my final year. That led to me starting a blog because the people who commissioned me to do it decided not to go ahead with it, and I spent money on that. And that led me to getting my first job at bellanaija.com, an online, the popular lifestyle website in Nigeria. And then from there, I got into General Electric because the hiring manager at the time needed a flair of new media, in our organization, in a team. So that's how I gradually progressed into marketing. And then I eventually took my time to start studying. I mean, after I'd spent some years in corporate comms and then product marketing, I decided that's what I really wanted to do. And I took my time to start writing examinations to then validate some of my, to validate my knowledge, really, even learn more as I move forward. So that's like a quick snapshot of how I transitioned from engineering into marketing communications.
Great. That's a good lesson, because most of us would want to take that. How would you advise for personal branding a candidate who has completed coursework and yet to finish thesis? That's Eleanor.
Okay, Eleanor. Okay, so if I get that right, I mean, so you mean you finish your coursework and you're yet to finish your thesis. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I would think maybe you're talking about, okay, how do you brand yourself personally? You finish your coursework, but you've not you've not finished your thesis. Of course, what do you do in between? You have to still answer those critical questions. What do you want to be? What do you want to be? Is your new or is your current aspiration still in line with the course you're studying? If it's not, then you start taking some small steps to start redirecting yourself. Of course, you still need to finish that course. Finish your thesis, submit it, graduate, and then begin to take further steps. But every time you have is an opportunity to learn something new, to collaborate, to volunteer your services in communities, for organizations, so that you begin to move forward and you begin to build, credibility, relevance. You perform, you build an image that is related to where you want to be, and then you start to get the right exposure. Should online courses, right, be included in CVs?
Okay. Oh, by the way, there is a surprise that you have for our audience here, and I know you want to help so many people on this aspect, and I want you to stress and say a few things about the ultimate personal branding toolkit that you prepared for those who want to work on their personal branding. And what's the surprise? What's the gift you have for us?
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you so much, Meti. So the personal branding DIY toolkit, DIY means do it yourself. Toolkit bundle offer is something that, I mean, I spoke with Grace of Opportunity Desk. Grace is the founder of opportunitydesk.org. And we try to think through how we could still add value. Not everyone necessarily wants to work with an organization or an expert, like, for example, at tweakmycontent.com. Some people are able to work on these things themselves. So what we've decided to do is to bundle a number of things together at a ridiculously, affordable amount. If you look at the value is probably like times 10 really of what we're putting out there. So we have the presentation slides for this particular session. Trust me, it's loaded, right? So you have that. You're supposed to have that. Then a DIY manual with CV and cover letter writing and editing tips. So you can, and then a 60-minute detailed step-by-step tutorial on how to craft and edit, a winning CV and cover letter, and then even get your LinkedIn profile, to an all-star level, and it's highly optimized. And then, of course, it also includes a LinkedIn content strategy and plan. And then you get also 20% discount if you decide that you want to have like a one-on-one review with the Tweak My Content team. So all of this together, we are collaborating with Opportunity Desk to make them available for early bird people. I mean, people who choose to sign up with it between now and Sunday, 17th of May, for just $25. That's 10,000 naira. For those who want to pay in naira. And then early bird 2 for those who want to pay after midnight on Sunday, up to the end of this month, you only get to pay $30, which is 12,000 naira. And then regular fee is $50 after the end of this month. So from June 1st, it will be available for $50, which is like 200, like 20,000 naira for Nigerians, those who want to pay in naira. And you can access all the details. I mean, everyone will get their toolkit. Everyone who has paid will get their toolkit by Tuesday, 2nd of June. And like I said, again, that's the presentation slides for this session, DIY manual on CV, cover letter writing, and a 60-minute detailed tutorial on how you can craft your CV yourself, your cover letter, get your LinkedIn profile highly optimized, in a LinkedIn content strategy and plan for you, and then 20% discount for one-on-one review session with me. And then all of this can be accessed via I think it's going to be flashed, right? It's on the screen. Bit.ly, that's bit.ly/personal branding kit. So trust me, it's a lot of value, but we decided to get this across because Opportunity Desk, for example, is particular about bringing opportunities to people in a way that is, quite convenient and affordable. Yeah. So that's the surprise we had all along.
Thank you so much. And hey, everybody, grab this opportunity because believe me, working on your personal brand is critical because your personal brand is what puts you bolder in the job market because the career opportunities are limited and the strongest one takes it. And for that, you have to have a very strong brand and you need to build it. It takes time, it takes work, but it's all worth it. Let's take one more question then. Josephine asked, should online courses be included in CVs under the category, under what category, like trainings?
Oh yeah, so Josephine Otieno, thank you so much for the question. Yes, absolutely. I've been singing this a lot to all our participants in recent trainings we've had. Online courses is a good time to take advantage of them. If you can't afford to go to a physical school right now, make the best of of the opportunities available, add value. If you can put it under training, under training and certifications, especially where you get a certificate. So some of them actually offer certificates, whether free or for a fee, just to ensure that you are able to get the best out there. So yes, by all means, yes, we're going to take all the questions. So I'm here. We'll take all the questions as much as possible. I can see that we have a lot of questions. So yes, trainings, online courses, please put them on your CV under training and certification. Otherwise, if it's like a proper degree, for example, on Coursera, I know University of Illinois offers they call it IMBA, like an internet MBA, like an online MBA. I mean, that can be under education even. So more like showing, yes, you've been certified, you've gone through this course, and you've been certified, fit with the knowledge, you now have the skills and competencies.
All right. Let's take another question then. I have one other question, by the way. So people say, no bad publicity, all publicity is good, even if it's bad. But then how does it affect our brand? And another question we took here is, are hobbies still a necessary addition onto the CV? Good question.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So you mentioned something about publicity, right? You said you're
Yes.
talking about, was it negative publicity? Is that what you mentioned? You mentioned something about negative publicity.
Yes. Negative publicity is good publicity, some say, but how does that affect our brand?
So for me personally, I mean, so now let's go back to the brand archetypes.
Okay.
So for a brand archetype that is an outlaw or a rebel, sometimes such a brand might be so adventurous that they don't want to care, and that's what they want to be known for. Like they don't care, like they will break boundaries, and yeah. So maybe it could work for that brand, but if you are more of if your brand archetype is innocent, like you're focused on safety, then you want to avoid scandals by all means, because that's not what you want to be known for. But some brands are, they just embody that sense of, disruptor. We will change the game. We don't care what the media is saying per se. Of course, ultimately, somewhere you still care about what the media says, because you have to look at brand reputation and all that. But if your brand is a rebel brand, then you may be allowed. I mean, you may be allowed to allow a lot of things to go, because that's the identity, the personality, the persona you're trying to project.
Okay.
And then about hobbies, about the hobbies on CV. So yes, by all means, hobbies, yes, you can have hobbies there, but just you be strategic about the choice of hobbies you put in there. And so we say hobbies and interests from our side, to just so that there's a bit of a broad, you can put a little bit more serious things in there. Then we have a question, right, from Yves.
Yeah, we list all our tasks and responsibilities in a CV.
So from my experience, I would say no, because it would then look so bulky. I think, like I mentioned, generally you should try to have about, say, 1,000 words max on your CV. If you have just like 2 years of experience, or you're still an undergraduate, except if those things are really, really critical. I think for me, you can use the core skills and responsibilities section at the top to highlight all the keywords that can help you scale through the ATS system, the applicant tracking system you get. So I think that's something to note. You don't have to list everything, just summarize them, focus more on your accomplishments, really.
Okay. Next question from Sunny. How about community service you do personally, not with a known organization as JCI? Can it be included in the CV?
Absolutely, it can be included. Just ensure that you have, think about the STAR model or the SAR model, like SAR, STAR. What did you do differently? What action did you take? What was the impact? Quantify the impact as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. What are the key things you must not miss in a CV?
I think for me, yeah, education is critical. Core competencies is critical. Work experience section is important. Think about results, numbers, try to quantify them as much as possible, qualify them as much as possible where you can't quantify them. But going forward, always remember to, which is what we've experienced with a lot of clients as well over the years. So if at this point you've not really taken cognizance of, being result oriented and showing it, going forward, please make sure you begin to note everything you do, and it's also make you become more responsible at work, because you can then always think about what can I do to increase my stars, right? To increase my
Yes.
stars, the quality of my stars.
So is it possible to get a platform to help one get better with CV creation as a professional who desires to help others? Is Israel?
Okay, Israel, is it possible to get a platform to help one get better with CV creation as a professional who desires to help others? Okay, yeah, so I know, yeah, I mean, you have to do a bit of research, but then you can, I think ultimately you can, so by doing, you learn more. By doing, you learn more. The more you do, the more you learn, the more you get a big, so initially you may want to take advantage of professional platforms. I know we can do that. For example, we can train people to train others, which is why we are offering these toolkits so that you can actually learn. I mean, I'm going to spend quite a bit of time to ensure that those 60 minutes of the tutorial will be worth it, for you. So you can use toolkits like that to learn and keep practicing and help others.
Yeah, while we are on CV, Doris asked if we should include our date of birth, nationality, and gender on our CV.
Yeah, thank you, Doris Mogambi. Date of birth, nationality, gender. So global standard generally. Yeah. So global standard generally is that no one should discriminate based on your date of birth and all that, nationality, gender. The employers should be they should embrace diversity, and then they should be inclusive as well. But in some peculiar situations, you may have to actually adjust. So, for example, in Nigeria, for some organizations, I think even in Europe also, for some organizations, they ask for those details. They have their formats. So they might give you a predetermined format for your CV where they call it bio. The section is bio, where they want you to still put those details. Others will ask for the bio details on their websites. And then even most multinationals will tell you when you're filling that particular set of information, they tell you that this will not be used to determine whether you qualify or not. And so they just allow you to put all those details just for their own analysis, maybe to just learn how eventually independently find out whether they are doing well with inclusivity or not, and equal opportunities, because you need to be an equal opportunity employer.
So yeah, like based on merits. Okay.
Yes, based on whether it's required or not, like maybe for government jobs sometimes.
Good. So, Mary Gama asked, could you expand on some tips to enhance exposure for introverts? Oh, yes.
Thank you,
And
Marigama.
it's
So,
a for
in
many.
case you did not know, I am an introvert. I am
Oh,
an
okay.
introvert. I've always been an introvert. I kind of am turning towards more of ambivert now, in between, right? So introverts, most times, which is a major challenge, introverts tend to get easily overlooked when it comes to things like promotion, not because they're not performing well, but they're probably not able to build the right image and get the right exposure as well. Or you might even have the right image, but sometimes you may not have the exposure, which is why in organizations they tell you to volunteer. So introverts, I would say, look for a way to communicate regardless. So if you don't really enjoy, like you find it difficult to like do public speaking, you can start by writing articles. So you can, which is why a platform like LinkedIn is so fantastic, because as an introvert, you can work on your writing skills. Introverts have a lot of ideas because we brood over a lot of things. We have a lot of thoughts. Usually we know what to do, and and how to do those things, right? So if you can explore things like joining some groups, volunteering, you have to make effort to push yourself out of the comfort zone. And then you may not really like being amongst people for a long time. After a while, you can then take your time and just step back, know when you can have your me time. But you need to always be able to show up, engage. Don't be seen as aloof or antisocial, for example. Participate, in group conversations, in volunteer to be part of the people organizing a group hangout, for example. Do things that normally people may not really, expect, and all that. So remember to tweet at, at Opportunity Desk, and then at Gbenga Awomodu. Then, of course, I mean, the Toolkit program, will flash the link on the screen again, so you can get the toolkit, bit.ly/personal branding kit. So yeah, so introverts, definitely there's a lot of opportunity for you to still build the right image and then get exposure. The truth is, after I started writing and sharing some of the things that we're doing in my organization, for example, on LinkedIn recently, I've been getting a lot more views from leaders, business leaders. People have been reaching out. Some people have even reached out in terms of business opportunities, for example, or collaboration opportunities. And I'm an introvert, but I've tried to look for ways. I enjoy writing. I enjoy planning, coming up with strategies. I enjoy interacting because I'm an introvert. I tend to reflect more. I can then identify people's needs, and then I can build. I mean, you can build relationships in a more sustainable way because you are very particular about your relationships that you build. And when you do that, begin to look at how you can then harness those relationships for exposure, so that you can document your success stories, challenges you face, and how you overcame them. If you're doing a project, you can share. LinkedIn is a good place where you can easily do those things quietly. You are an introvert, but you can still write. That can be one way forward. Then remember to volunteer as well. Take part, stretch yourself a bit, go out of your comfort zone from time to time, because you need to show up. Otherwise, you don't want your talent to be buried somewhere because you're not building the right image and then getting the right exposure for your capabilities.
Yeah. Unfortunately, currently the situation looks like it's great for extroverts, but life does not work that way. There's always a yin and yang, a positive and negative. Like there is always duality. So as much as we need extroverts, we also need introverts. Actually, in some instances, in some scenarios, more so. So yeah, don't forget that. Don't forget to grab the opportunity of getting the toolkits, the ultimate personal DIY branding toolkit, and follow the link, and make sure that you tweet and you post across your social media by tagging Opportunity Desk. Everywhere it's Opportunity Desk, and share the nuggets, the knowledge, the wisdom that you get from the session. And we all would love to thank you and to say that we're honored to be here. By the way, you were amazing, and the comments say that. All the comments that I've gone through, they say you've given them, the audience, really, really great knowledge, and they're going to use it. And I'm going to see a lot of progress in branding themselves in most of our audiences. So thank you, Gbenga. That was amazing.
Thank you, Meti. Yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much.
So everybody, thank you for joining us once again, and we hope to see you whenever we have live sessions. And make sure that you follow us at Opportunity Desk across the social media and get really important and timely information and opportunities. And I hope to see you soon, and take care. Good night. Thank you.
Yeah, good night. Yeah, bye.